Hey everybody, long time no see. You looking pretty good. Looking good. Anyways, what's going on? It's been a while. I apologize for my absence. I was under the weather there, and my throat was hurting real bad. So, as you can tell, can't talk. Anyways, yeah, sore throat, so I didn't want to talk too much on Talon Talks. So I took a little hiatus there for a bit, but now I'm back, and I got a haircut, as you can tell, because I remember telling you guys in one of the last episodes I was getting a haircut, so I got a haircut. And now we're back with The Biology of Belief by Dr.Bruce Lipton, and I believe we're on Chapter 7. Chapter 7, Conscious Parenting. Parents as Genetic Engineers. Should be interesting. No doubt you've heard the seductive argument that once parents bestow their genes on their children, they take a back seat in their children's lives. Parents need only refrain from abusing their children, feed and clothe them, and then wait to see where their pre-programmed genes lead them. This notion allows parents to continue with their pre-kid lives. They can simply drop their children off at daycare and with babysitters. It's an appealing idea for busy and or lazy parents. It's also appealing for parents like me who have biological children with radically different personalities. I used to think that my daughters are different because they inherited different sets of genes from the moment of conception, a random selection process in which their mother and I had no part. After all, I thought they grew up in the same environment, nurture, so the reason for their differences had to be genetic, nature. The reality, I know now, is very different. Frontier science is confirming what mothers and enlightened fathers have known forever, that parents do matter, despite best-selling books that try to convince them otherwise. To quote Dr. Thomas Verney, a pioneer in the field of prenatal and perinatal psychiatry, findings in the peer-reviewed literature over the course of decades established beyond any doubt that parents have overwhelming influence on the mental and physical attributes of the children they raise. Well, of course, how you talk to them, what you tell them, but I think what he's implying is in the womb. And that influence starts, says Verney, not after children are born, but before children are born. When Verney first posited the notion that the influence of parents extends even to the womb in his landmark 1981 book, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, the scientific evidence was preliminary and the experts skeptical, because scientists used to think that the human brain did not become functional until after birth. It was assumed that fetuses and infants had no memory and felt no pain. After all, noted Freud, who coined the term infantile amnesia, most people do not remember anything that happened to them before they were 3 or 4 years old. However, experimental psychologists and neuroscientists are demolishing the myth that infants cannot remember, or for that matter, learn, and along with it, the notion that parents are simply spectators in the unfolding of their children's lives. The fetal and infant nervous system has vast sensory and learning capabilities and a kind of memory that neuroscientists call implicit memory. Another pioneer in pre- and perinatal psychology, David Chamberlain, writes in his book, The Mind of Your Newborn Baby, the truth is, much of what we have traditionally believed about babies is false. They are not simply beings, but complex and ageless. Small creatures with unexpectedly large thoughts. These complex, small creatures have a pre-birth life in the womb that profoundly influences their long-term health and behavior. The quality of life in the womb, our temporary home before we were born, programs our susceptibility to coronary artery disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and a multitude of other conditions in later life, writes Dr. Peter W. Nathaniels. In Life in the Womb, the Origin of Health and Disease. Recently, an even wider range of adult-related chronic disorders, including osteoporosis, mood disorders, and psychoses, have been intimately linked to pre- and perinatal development influences. Interesting. So while in the womb, recognizing the role of prenatal environment plays Recognizing the role the prenatal environment plays in creating diseases forces a reconsideration of genetic determinism. Nathaniels writes, there is mounting evidence that programming of lifetime health by the conditions in the womb is equally, if not more important than our genes in determining how we perform mentally and physically during life. Gene myopia is the term that best describes the current all-pervasive view that our health and destiny throughout life are controlled by our genes alone. In contrast to the relative fatalism of gene myopia, understanding the mechanisms that underlie programming by the quality of life in the womb, we can improve the start in life for our children and their children. The programming mechanism Nathaniels refers to are the epigenetic mechanisms discussed earlier by which environmental stimuli regulate gene activity. As Nathaniels states, parents can improve the prenatal environment. In so doing, they act as genetic engineers for their children. The idea that parents can transmit hereditary changes for their life to their children is, of course, a Lamarckian concept that conflicts with Darwinism. Nathaniels is one of the scientists now brave enough to invoke the L word for Lamarck. The transgenerational passage of characteristics by non-genetic means does occur. Lamarck was right, although transgenerational transmission of acquired characteristics occurs by mechanisms that were unknown in his day. The responsiveness of individuals to the environmental conditions perceived by their mothers before birth allows them to optimize their genetic and physiological development as they adapt to the environmental forecast. The same life-enhancing epigenetic plasticity of human development can go awry and lead to an array of chronic diseases in older age if an individual experiences adverse nutritional and environmental circumstances during fetal and neonatal periods of development. The same epigenetic influences also continue after the child is born because parents continue to influence their child's environment. In particular, fascinating new research is emphasizing the importance of good parenting in the development of the brain. For the growing brain of a young child, the social world supplies the most important experience, influencing the expression of genes, which determines how neurons connect to one another and creating the neuronal pathways which give rise to mental activity, writes Dr. Daniel J. Siegel in The Developing Mind. In other words, infants need a nurturing environment to activate the genes that develop healthy brains. Parents, the latest science reveals, continue to act as genetic engineers even after the birth of their child. And that's very true. Growing up, my parents raised me a certain way, and I thank them for everything that they did. But at some point, I decided that I didn't want to raise my kids the same way. And that rose to the surface when I had my second child, and I began doing all the personal development stuff and working on myself and becoming more conscious and aware of my unconscious reactive behavior. And I really started to change myself, and that has not only changed me, but it has helped with the relationship with my wife and my kids, and it shows. So when you go to talk to your kid, the way you talk to your kid has implications that we can't see. Anyways, continuing on. Parental programming, the power of the subconscious mind. I'd like to tell you about how I, who put myself in the category of those who were not prepared to have children, came to question my ingrained assumptions about parenting. You won't be surprised to hear that I started my reevaluation in the Caribbean, the place where my shift to the new biology took root. My reassessment was actually inspired by an unlucky event, a motorcycle accident. I was on my way to present a lecture when I went off a curb at a high speed. The bike wound up upside down. Luckily, I was wearing a helmet because I sustained a major blow to my head when the bike hit the ground. I was unconscious for half an hour, and for a while my students and colleagues thought I was dead. When I came to, I felt as if I had broken every bone in my body. For the next few days, I could hardly walk, and when doing so, I resembled a yelping version of Quasimodo. Every step was a painful reminder that speed kills. As I creaked out of the classroom one afternoon, one of my students suggested that it might help if I visited his roommate, a fellow student who was also a chiropractor. As I explained in the last chapter, I not only had never been to a chiropractor, I had been taught by my allopathic community to shun chiropractors as quacks. But when you're in that much pain and you're in an unfamiliar setting, you wind up trying things you would never have considered in your cushier moments. At the chiropractor's makeshift dormitory office, I was introduced for the first time to kinesiology, popular known as muscle testing. The chiropractor told me to hold out my arm and resist the downward pressure he applied to it. I had no problem resisting the light force he put on my arm. Then he asked me to hold out my arm and resist him again while I said, "My name is Bruce." Again, I had no trouble resisting him, but now I was starting to think that the admonishments of my academic colleagues were right on the mark. This is nuts. Then the chiropractor told me to hold out my arm and resist the pressure while saying earnestly, "My name is Mary." To my amazement, my arm flopped down despite my strong resistance. "Now wait a minute," I said. "I must not have been resisting enough. Try that again." So he did this, and this time I concentrated even more forcefully on resisting. Nevertheless, after repeating, "My name is Mary," my arm sunk like a stone. The student, who was now my teacher, explained that when your conscious mind has a belief that is in conflict with a formerly learned truth stored in the subconscious mind, the intellectual conflict expresses itself as a weakening of the body's muscles. Wow. That's pretty wild. To my astonishment, I realized that my conscious mind, which I exercised so confidently in academic settings, was not in control when I voiced an opinion that differed from a truth stored in the unconscious mind. My unconscious mind was undoing the best efforts of my conscious mind to hold up my arm when I claimed my name was Mary. I was amazed to discover that there was another mind, another force that was co-piloting my life. More shocking was the fact that this hidden mind, the mind I knew little about, except theoretically in psychology, was actually more powerful than my conscious mind, just as Freud had claimed. All in all, my first visit to a chiropractor turned out to be a life-changing experience. I learned that chiropractors could tap into the body's innate healing power using kinesiology to target spinal misalignments. I was able to saunter out of the dorm feeling like a new man after a few simple vertebral adjustments on the quack's table, all without the use of drugs. And more importantly, I was introduced to the man behind the curtain, my subconscious mind. As I left the campus, my conscious mind was a whirl over the implications of the superior power of my formerly hidden subconscious mind. I also coupled those musings with my study of quantum physics, which taught me that my thoughts could propel behavior more efficiently than physical molecules. My subconscious knew that my name was not Mary and balked at my insistence that it was. What else did my subconscious mind know, and how had it learned it? And one of the biggest things that affected my life was the words, "You are not your brain." And I really sat and contemplated that, because we, as a species, depending on who you are and the type of individual you are, we may assume that we are our brain because that's where some part of consciousness is derived from, even though they can't pinpoint it. So when I heard that, and they compared the brain to the heart, the lungs, your hand, whatever, it's a tool, right? It's a tool you use to navigate life. So then, if your brain, it's an organ. So if you're not your brain, then what are you? Right? I came to believe in the soul. You don't have to. I'm not saying you do. But I believe in the soul. That's why we're all different. That's why we all have different personalities. Yes, we can go genetics, blah, blah, blah. We can go down that route too. But at the same time, I think we all have that little source of life inside of us that gives us that electric energy, which we are, and creates who we are. And it's amazing. It's amazing. So when I realized that I'm not my brain, I was like, well, then I need to start using this thing to the best of my abilities. Well, how can I use it to the best of my abilities? Learn more about it. That's what I started doing. Started learning more about it, started learning how neural pathways work, learning what happens when you want to feel something, learning about all the things, all the systems, everything, immune system, vascular system, etc., etc., etc. Learning all about it. And I mean, at what point in our lives do we feel the need or want to do that? Right? We're told when we're children and as we grow up, get a job, go to college, blah, 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 save for retirement, buy a house, have kids, have a wife, and then retire at 65. And then when you're done school, that's it. You're done. You go to college, do your degree, you're done. That's it. Get a job. Right? They don't really say, hey, here's personal development section at the library. You might want to check it out. Learn how you operate. Because when we're born, nobody goes, hey, welcome to the world. Here's an operations manual. This is how you work. This is how your system works. This is how you can manage it. This is how you can operate it to the best of its abilities. There's some troubleshooting in the back. You know, there's an index, etc., etc. No, it doesn't work like that. We learn based off of what our parents show us, what society shows us, what we learn in schools, all that stuff. But then when you start opening up books that start changing the way you think and giving you information to different areas that you've never explored before, your whole world changes. You start changing what he's doing in the subconscious mind. You start changing those self-limiting beliefs because now you're onto something new, right? You're onto something new, and it's addicting because it's like, well, what else can I learn? What else do I not know? And we don't know shit. We don't know jack shit. You could read as many books as you want. You still don't know jack shit. Right? Excuse me. So when I learned that, that's when my whole life just shifted and changed. And I cannot be more thankful than to the individual that said those words, that sparked this journey. And now here we are. I have a podcast where I yammer on about all sorts of things and read books, pronounce words wrong, but I'm getting better. And we have a lot of fun, right? And because of that little outburst, I lost where I was. I think I just need to start the page. Yeah, there we go. Continuing on. Got a few more minutes and then I'll end it. To understand better what had happened in that chiropractor's office, I first turned to comparative neuroanatomy, which reveals that the lower an organism is on the tree of evolution, the less developed its nervous system, and thus the more it relies on pre-programmed behavior, nature. Moths fly towards the light, sea turtles return to specific islands and lay their eggs on the beach at the appropriate time, and the swallows return to Capistrano on a specific date, yet as far as we know, none of these organisms have any knowledge of why they engage in those behaviors. The behaviors are innate. They are genetically built into the organism and are classified as instincts. Organisms higher in the tree have more complexly integrated nervous systems headed by bigger and bigger brains that allow them to acquire intricate behavioral patterns through experiential learning, nurture. The complexity of this environmental learning mechanism presumably culminates with humans who are at the top, or at least near the top of the tree. To quote anthropologists Emily A. Schultz and Robert H. Lavenda, human beings are more dependent on learning for survival than other species. We have no instincts that automatically protect us and find us food and shelter, for example. We do have, of course, behavioral instincts that are innate. Consider the infant's instinct to suckle, to quickly move his hand away from fire, and to automatically swim when placed in water. Instincts are built-in behaviors that are fundamental to the survival of all humans, independent of what culture they belong to or what time in human history they were born. We are born with the ability to swim. Infants can swim like graceful porpoises moments after they are born, but children quickly acquire a fear of the water from their parents. Observe the response of their parents when their unattended child ventures near a pool or other open water. Children learn from their parents that water is dangerous. Parents must later struggle to teach Johnny how to swim. Their first big effort is focused on overcoming the fear of water they instilled in earlier years. Man, that's so crazy that we do that unknowingly. But through evolution, our learned perceptions have become more powerful, especially because they can override genetically programmed instincts. The body's physiological mechanisms, example heart rate, blood pressure, blood flow, bleeding patterns, body temperature, are, by their nature, programmed instincts. However, yogis as well as everyday people using biofeedback can learn to consciously regulate these innate functions. Scientists have focused on our big brains as a reason for our ability to learn such complex behavior. However, we should temper our enthusiasm for big brain theory by considering that elephants, whales, and cetaceans, porpoises, and dolphins have a greater cerebral surface area packed into their craniums than we do. And the findings of British neurologist Dr. John Lorber, highlighted in a 1980 article in Science, Is Your Brain Really Necessary?, also call into question the notion that the size of the brain is the most important consideration for human intelligence. Lorber studied many cases of hydrocephalus, water on the brain, and concluded that even when most of the brain's cerebral cortex, the brain's outer layer, is missing, patients can live normal lives. Science writer Roger Lewin quotes Lorber in his article. There's a young student at this university who has an IQ of 126, has gained a first-class honors degree in mathematics, and is socially completely normal, and yet the boy has virtually no brain. When we did a brain scan on him, we saw that instead of the normal 4.5 centimeter thickness of brain tissue between the ventricles and the cortical surface, there was just a thin layer of mantle measuring a millimeter or so. His cranium is filled mainly with cerebrospinal fluid. Wow. Excuse me. Lorber's proactive findings suggest that we need to reconsider our long-held beliefs about how the brain works and the physical foundation of human intelligence. I submit in the epilogue of this book that the human intelligence can only be fully understood when we include spirit, energy, or what quantum physics savvy psychologists call the superconscious mind. But for the moment, I'd like to stick to the conscious and subconscious minds, concepts that psychologists and psychiatrists have long grappled with. I'm grappling with it here to provide the biological foundation for conscious parenting as well as energy-based psychological healing methods. Okay, we're going to end it there. So there you go. Subconscious mind. There's lots of books out there. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by, who is that? I have a bunch of books like that, but once you start getting into this field and on this journey, it gets fun and exciting because of all the things you get to learn that you never knew. And then not only that, the things that you're learning are beneficial to you, right? You can use the tools that they give and the knowledge that they provide to change your life. It's wild. And all you got to do realistically is change how you think. Because when you change how you think, that changes how you act, which changes how you speak, which changes your behavior, which changes your reactions, which, changes your responses. You become more conscious. You become more aware. You become more here in the now. You're not in here all the time just on autopilot, right? Anyways, my throat's starting to get pretty sore from all this talking. So with that being said, thank you everybody for tuning in. I missed you guys. I'm glad I did one episode at least. I was going to do two, but right now my my throat's getting pretty sore. So I hope you all have a great day, and we'll catch you at the next one. Cheers.